up, everybody? You're on live with Joe Leonardo and Alexander Turbin, comic book guys, comic books from coast to coast. I'm Joe Leonardo.
I'm Alexander Turbin.
And we're here talking today about cool comics and everything that goes along with it. And yesterday I was lucky enough to get out to one of my local cons and meet some amazing comic book creators and just see a lot of cool stuff that's going on in the comic book universe. And it's so fun to get out and do all that stuff. I mean, like, because we're all so isolated behind our art desks creating comics all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah,
you
definitely.
never, we're part of a big industry of people that fully love all this stuff, and you don't really necessarily always know you're part of that because we're always in here so grinding away. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was out once asked by I believe it was Nate asked me. He said being a comic book artist back in the '90s must have been so awesome. With all of the vibes and stuff. And I was like, no, man, it is so much better now because you can do some art and then you can show it on Instagram or Facebook or whatever and get like an instant feedback, instant gratification or whatever. Whereas before it was like go do some artwork for 3 or 4 months and then maybe go to a convention. If not that, then you just kind of, dither away, show family or friends or whatever. But it is so much better now with
Yeah.
social
Or you
media.
sent it out and just waited to get something back, but sometimes you never did, or
Yeah,
you never
yeah.
got that. You never came back and was like, "Yes, we love you. Fly here immediately. We have to have your stuff." It was
Right,
always just
right.
like,
No.
"Hey, no one gives a crap about your art. It's not that good. Keep on trying, though." Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I definitely love Instagram and because people complain about Instagram nonstop. And I'm pretty new to Instagram. I'm only like 4 or 5 years in, I guess. And I love it. I think it's, there's definitely parts of it where, you scroll through videos or whatever and you get pretty much everything that you hate because that's the algorithm is they want you to interact with things. So if you're either gonna love something and give it a little heart, or you're gonna hate something and get your juices flowing and then really respond in some sort of, negative way. So I love it.
I
I love
don't.
Instagram.
I mean, I'm only on there actually for like maybe 2 years now. I want to say, like,
Yeah.
pretty new to it. Like, in all the social media stuff, it's not really my bag. Guys like us, we grew up outside all that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
hey, what's up, GTO? Sweet, what's going on, bro? It's glad to
Hey,
see you're here,
GTO.
man. It's super cool. But yeah, it is. It's really, it's awesome to have your online. I mean, you and I met through Instagram. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yep.
Like, we
Yeah,
live
definitely.
on the other side of America. You know what I mean? I'm in
Yeah.
California, you're in freaking East Coast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we're bros. Like,
Yeah.
so it's super cool to be able to have that where you can meet other people with like mind mentalities and have the same kind of like interesting like side things that we do and share a lot of our same historical things that we love that we maybe necessarily weren't together hanging out when we experienced them, but we were both there
Yeah.
having those
Yeah. Yeah.
experiences just the same. And it's cool
Yeah,
to have
definitely.
friends to talk to about all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So what prompted you to go to the conventions? So that leads me up to the '90s. The only way to contact other people, other than pen pals or whatever. But the only other way to interact with other nerds was conventions. So what prompted you to go to this convention?
Actually, it just was local. You know what I mean? Like, Sacramento's only about an hour drive for me.
Yeah,
So that's cool. It was, fairly inexpensive. It was just the tickets were $20. There's 2 days you could go. I mean, I would have liked to have gone again today, and I mean, I would have liked to, but I commute that hour to work every day. When I go to
yeah,
work, it's not quite an hour. It's about 45, 40 minutes. But it's a long drive, and it's
yeah,
twice a day. You know what I mean? So like on my weekends, I really need to detox from driving. You know what I mean? So
yep,
like, I don't drive on the weekends if I can avoid it. And that, long trip yesterday really burned me up, like, and I
I
just
bet.
don't want to make another, long trip and then, go right back to work for 5 days, you know what I mean? And have like 10 days of driving under my belt without that's literally the only thing that prevented me from going today because the ticket was for both days.
Yeah, yep, yep. So there was also Uh, so did you see it in like an advertisement, a commercial or
Actually,
something?
actually, my daughter, she just, she she's down with everything I do, and she just always helps me out and stuff. And her and her husband are both
The
fans of the culture, you know what I mean? They both love
you
anime and they both
you
love
could say it, nerds. They're
comics.
nerds. You could say it.
Yeah, yeah, like, well, I don't think anybody that loves this stuff is nerds. I mean, they're the coolest people in the world, to be perfectly honest, man. And trust me, I
I
could tell you because I'm a super cool dude, Alex. Like, I was a surfer and a skater kid. I hung out with all the bad kids. I
yeah.
like did everything wrong that makes you cool and that sends you nowhere. Like,
I
and
I say nerd as a compliment. I'm
I
I'm
know.
I'm king nerd. So
I
so
was
I
gonna say,
I
like,
say it's a huge compliment for me.
it's always rad when you meet people that could just own who they are. Like when I was younger, you know what I mean? Like I kind of put all that stuff away because I felt like it wasn't cool or whatever. And that's why I
Yep.
sold my comics, and that's why just
Yeah.
stopped doing it. It's why I stopped drawing and everything. It's not like I was like, oh, this is not cool. It was just like it doesn't interest me anymore. Like that's something I used to do. Like I do this now. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then later on, like you realize, like it doesn't have to be like that. Like
Yeah.
you love doing this. You should never say goodbye to it. It's an important part of what you are and something that you've always enjoyed. You enjoyed this way before you had concepts of cool and stuff like that in your
Yeah.
brain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so, like it's so rad to see people just being themselves and being totally free at those things. It's like super fun. All
Yeah.
these people dressed up, and all the different facets of society that are interested in it's
Yeah.
high money making businessmen. It's
Yeah. It's
goofy
cool.
dudes who live in their mom's basement. It's everything. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's just like
Yeah.
everything. Like,
Yeah, I love it. I
but
mean, I grew up defending comic books. Like if I was reading a comic book or drawing a comic or something like that, and somebody gave me a snarky response or whatever, I would go into this tirade of how comic books was an artistic medium and is just as valid as TV or movies or anything like
oh,
that. So
definitely,
I'm
definitely.
I'm
Hey,
I'm
just want
like
to take a
the
go ahead. I'm
yeah.
sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, I'm just like the go-to guy who's gonna fight for the medium pretty much.
Well, real quickly, I just want to say hi to Mario Alvarado, and
Hey,
thanks for tuning in,
Maria.
bro. It's super
Maria.
cool to have you.
Hey,
Oh,
Maria.
oh, Maria. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're right. You're right, Maria.
Mm.
Okay. Um, very small phone here. You guys have to forgive me. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's super fun to see everybody out there. I mean, I went there personally just to find people I work with. I just thought it would be a cool place to you know, give out some of my comics and trade them, with other people and,
Yeah.
show my art to other artists, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
I knew
definitely.
that they're like, I didn't know like how, that they would have they had a pretty large pro artist presence there, you know what I mean? Like a surprisingly large. And it was
Yeah.
weird because they really didn't advertise it at all. Like I'd only literally seen one artist advertised and I didn't know who he was. And,
Who was it?
you know, I don't like his name has
Yeah,
not
I
come
remember.
to me real quickly. But when I
Yeah.
was there was a multitude of artists. Like there was like
Yeah.
20 of them or whatever. And there was a lot of stuff going on. Like Ming Na, the voice of
Oh,
Mulan
yeah,
was there.
I know that.
Yeah, she played the that assassin on season 2
Yep, yep, yeah,
of
she was I know her from,
Mandalorian.
Stargate Universe. She was
Oh, was she on
a big
Stargate too?
character. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was there and they didn't even say anything about that. She was there taking pictures of people and meeting the fans.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
they had the actors, all the karate guys that did the bodies for Ninja Turtles were there.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it wasn't the voice actors, but it was all the actual,
Right,
in
right.
costume performers.
Yeah,
And Shredder was there too. Shredder was there,
yeah.
and
From
that was
from the
cool.
movies
And
or from the you mean
yeah,
the,
yeah, from the movies. Yeah, the guy who
yeah,
played Shredder in the movies. Yeah, I'm not
cool.
sure who that. Yeah,
Right.
I don't think I've ever watched the Ninja Turtle movies, the
I've
classic
seen
ones.
it. I've seen them once or twice. I've never been a big fan of the movies, to be honest.
I just was not I just never really gelled on the Ninja Turtles that much. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It kind of,
yeah,
I was just a little bit too old for it, I think, when it came
yeah,
out.
I think
Like
so too.
Ninja Turtles landed for me like right around the same time as Grips and Faust did or whatever. You know what I mean? Like all
Yeah,
that stuff was going to happen at the same time. And I think
yeah,
I was way more tuned into, you know what I mean? Like the adult, stuff or whatever in Ninja Turtles. I didn't even understand the obsession with it. You know what I mean? I was really tripping out on how people just like went nuts over that thing when it came out. I recall just being like, really? And then seeing
yeah,
all the all the like-minded copycats that came out afterwards, all the
Yeah.
senile samurai slugs, and you know what I
Yeah.
mean, and time
Yeah.
beavers and fish police and all this stuff that fully followed suit right after it, you know.
Yeah. Well, I was tuned into the Turtles because the creators are from Maine, so that was kind of like a big thing for us being Mainers and the
That's
Turtle
funny, you
creators.
know. I'm a huge Stephen King guy, you know, and I've written a
Yeah.
couple novels myself, you know, and I'm, you know, an aspiring novelist. And wish I could do that for a living, you know what I mean? Because as good as an artist as I am, dude, I'm better at writing, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like I'm better at writing like prose, you know what I mean? Because I've like been reading books since I've been a nerd book reader since fourth grade, you know what I mean? Like when I was in the fourth
Right.
grade, I already had like a college level reading, you know what I mean? And I've just been consuming books my whole life. So when I started to write as an older person, like I, you know, I have a big vocabulary, and I'm, you know, I'm really good at colorful prose, you know, and telling the story with meaningful dialogue or whatever, you know.
Right.
And I love writing, you know, it's one of my favorite things. And so often, like my kids and I will get out my books and we'll sit and read them out loud, you know, and just have like such a fun time. Like, and sometimes I'll just be like blown away that I wrote the things, you know, I'd be like, my God,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't believe I wrote this. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they're big books. Like the first one is 400 pages and the second one is almost 600 pages, you know.
Wow, that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I'm a huge Stephen guy, and I, you know, and I personally, I drove a laundry truck delivery for, you know, a long time, like 15 years, and that's essentially like when you deliver all the napkins to like fancy restaurants, like fancy restaurants that have
Yep.
like starch napkins and starch
Yep.
tablecloths, you know, because those have to be laundered every week. You know what I mean? So like, you know, we did all these fancy restaurants, and uh, you know, the laundry is just like a glorified garbage man. You know what I mean? Like you just pick up this nasty restaurant. It's so gross from sitting there over the, you know, someone
Yeah.
broke a 50-gallon jar of maraschino cherries and they just clean it up with a couple of tablecloths and some napkins and they just throw it in a big bin or whatever. And then it sits in there and rots in the sun and gets maggots until you pick it up, you know, the next week or whatever. And
Yeah.
so, you know, I always just felt like a glorified garbage man doing it, but it paid well. And, you know, it put the kids through school and took care of the bills and was like, that's what mattered. And I recall picking up the Stephen King on reading or on writing book. Have you ever read that one? He wrote a book just about the concept of writing.
No, I haven't read that one.
It's just all his thinking, all his thoughts on writing or whatever, you know. And he goes into big about his like past and what it was like for him before, you know, he became a
Yeah.
renowned author or whatever. And he worked at a dirty laundry and with his mom. His mom worked
Yeah.
there too, you know what I mean?
It's
And
funny. It's funny that you say that because the laundromat, and this ties into a video series that I am considering doing because since I live so close to him and I knew him and I knew his sons and stuff, I'm really considering going to the locations that inspired his books and short stories and stuff, and kind of filming and talking about that kind of stuff because so many of the locations in Bangor and in Maine in general are, you know, backdrops for his stuff. But my first real girlfriend was the owner of the business that he worked at that was inspired. I don't know what story it was. The story of
the
the
rats or whatever, the
it's something. It's the cleaning press or something that becomes alive or something like
oh,
that.
I know exactly.
And
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I don't
right.
know the name of that one off the top of my head, but I do. I know exactly the Mangler or something like that. I think
Yeah,
is what it's called. Like,
it's something like that. Yeah. So
dude, we
my
had one of those. We had a
yeah.
Mangler at my work or whatever. We had
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
those.
So he worked at my first real girlfriend that I had in high school. Her family owns the business that he worked at, so she would always, you know, be talking about how that was his inspiration for that,
Yeah,
which was pretty cool.
you know, I mean, it's a hard job and it's dirty, and you know, it's you don't get no appreciation for doing it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
no, no,
And when I discovered that, because like you don't know that about people. You just think this person's some rad dude who has this rad life and he's a big important person. That's all I've known since I was a little kid. I mean, he's been famous since I was little. It was
right.
just really fascinating, to hear the human side of this guy. You know what I mean? And be like, oh wow, like you guys have a lot in common. He's just like you. He worked some dirty, crappy job, and he just
Yeah,
aspired to do more with his life. You know what I mean? And just he lucked out and was at the right place at the right time, and all his hard work came together, and it's like we all lucked out because of it. Because I mean, he's, obviously his work is so amazing, and I mean, I'm such a huge fan of his stuff.
Right.
It's outrageous, and that was just cool. It was just cool to discover that little detail about him, and I felt very connected to the guy, because of that or whatever.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, definitely. So, who
But
else?
I went there. I went to the thing, hoping to get
Yep.
like, some professional criticism, and I met a
Yep.
couple very amazing artists, obviously, and one of them was, it was so insane, dude, to do this, and this was Joe Rubinstein, and this is his card right here. Hopefully my camera doesn't look like crap and people can see this.
Yeah.
But Joe Rubinstein's comic book art, original ink sketches, and then he will ink over other artists' pencil work, full color stuff available. Look at that gorgeous, Doctor Strange, from that's clearly what's his name from the movies or whatever, what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
I can't. I
that's
can't see it. Oh, Cumberbatch.
Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And classic guy behind Wolverine and all that stuff. And it was so amazing to have him give some time to me. And he gave me, some critiques that were just like, I put it up on Instagram, and
Yeah.
like I said, my
Yeah, I
reel
thought it was great.
has over like this coming up on 2,000 views, which is outrageous for me. Like a goofball like me never gets that kind of like,
Yeah.
never pays attention to my stuff like that. And then it's over 100 likes, and you know how hard it is to get likes on a reel, dude. It's almost impossible. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you're lucky if you get 30 or 40 likes, and if you get 400 views, that's an outrageously good reel. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
to do a reel that got almost 2,000 views in one day, and you know what I mean, is over, well over 100 likes right now. It's outrageous, but that's people really pouring out for their love of Joe Rubinstein more. It's not me. You know what I mean? It's people like just like so stoked to see him, speaking on a subject that he is so well known for and knows so much about. But dude does fine art paintings, watercolor, gouache. That's how you say that, right?
Yep.
Gouache.
Yep.
Or I was going to say gouache. Gouache,
No.
gouache
And,
or oil.
yeah.
Portraits and full body.
Gouache is basically watercolors with white. You're using white.
Is that what that is? See, I don't really know much about painting or whatever.
Yep.
But he, he's been working for Marvel Comics and DC Comics for decades now, and one of the great creators. He was the guy who inked Frank Miller's Wolverine miniseries.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, dude.
Wait.
And I mean,
he did.
What's that?
That wasn't. Oh, yep. Because I was thinking that was Claus Janson, but no, it would have been way more.
No. Yeah, you would think it was, right?
Yeah.
But no, he inked it, and it was amazing having him go over my work. And he was so kind, and he was so generous, and he had like a line of probably like 50 people. And I kind of just like, I wasn't, I sort of like just wandered up to the table, and he was talking to somebody else and signing some stuff, and I just asked him if he could look at my stuff. And I didn't even realize there was a line at his thing when I did it. And honestly, I should have gotten line and waited to get up there like everybody else was. And I kind of want to just sit here and apologize to anybody who was there who saw this or whatever, and realize I didn't mean to do that to anybody or whatever, because he ended up talking to me for a good, probably close to 10, 15 minutes,
Yeah.
And he just stopped his line, you know what I mean? And I was incredibly flattered, and I was incredibly grateful, and it was so cool having him just, he didn't even rip my work up, you know what I mean? Like, he was very like generous and just very like, I tried to be as humble as I possibly could, and I tried to just listen to everything he said, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's what it takes. That's what it takes to be a good artist. Is you can't
kind and generous, man. He drew right on top of the piece of paper, and he drew right on top of the art or whatever, Yeah. And I told him, I was like, hey man, you put whatever marks, because he was like, oh, where's a piece of paper I could draw? And I was like, no, draw right on the page. It's fine. Like, I was like, I could re-ink that again if I ever needed to. And that thing's been already, it was the Max Murder double spread, and I had already, that's already been published or whatever. So I was like, now I got Joe Rubinstein original inks on one of my pages,
Yeah. That's awesome.
And he was like, he was so cool, and he just like really was helpful, really explained a lot of things to me. Like watch, I'll bust this piece out real fast. And this was real interesting and helpful right here. Because I brought a few, I'm sorry, I'm away from my mic. I brought a few these big pinups I do long. And this can't be seen too well on here. This is really kind of way too big. But,
Yeah.
you know, this Batman piece right here, you know, which has these cloud of bats back here, you know, and they're all cross-hatched.
Yeah.
You know, this is cross-hatched right here, you know.
Yeah.
But over here on this side, you know, where you get this sort of wash back of the Gotham Harbor or whatever, you know, and you got all these like skyscraper buildings in the background, sort of like misty harbor thing going on over here. And he kind of was just like, oh, like all this stuff is really good, you know, and he's like the Batman here, and he's like, you know, you got all this gray wash on here, and he goes, now why is this gray wash? And then he goes, and why is the other side crosshatched? You know what I mean? He goes, it doesn't make no sense. Hey, Daniel, what's going on, bud? It's always good to see you. So cool to see you here, Dan. And I was like, yeah, you're right. That doesn't make sense. He goes, see, he goes, you're disunifying this piece. He goes, both of those things look great. He goes, the crosshatch looks great. He goes, this ink wash looks great. He goes, but by having them both together in background places, he goes, you're ununifying your ideas. He goes, is this an ink wash piece or is it a crosshatch piece? He goes, mostly you have ink wash on here. He was like, why is there no ink wash coming up under the edge of the cape? He goes, there should be, you know what I mean? He goes, you are trying to do something, but you don't exactly understand everything that's going on. He goes, your art is fearless, which I was insanely just like, I just keep hearing him say that again. He goes, your art is beautiful and fearless, but he goes, you know a lot. He goes, but you need more, you know what I mean? And he was like, he was explaining like, he goes like, okay, like, so I have this cool, like, it's super hard to see on this thing, but there's this sort of like Akira light stripe going off the bike right here, you know, probably can't see on this feed at all because the piece is just way too big. And he was just explaining to me that the light value back here where the piece is, the light is fading away, and back and over here where the light is, you know, or whatever, you know, because this is the pinpoint of the light, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he was explaining that the values need to be different. It's like the values here should be brighter, you know, everything here should be bright. He goes, as it's fading back, everything should get darker, you know what I mean? He goes, the art is beautiful. He goes, but these little things will really unify it and bring it all together. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So it was cool to hear stuff like that because you don't necessarily always think about things like that, you know, like you're just like, you know, especially me, I'm just like, okay, I'm trying to make this look great or look as cool as I can make it look, you know, and you're just trying different techniques and doing different things. Yeah. And, you know, you might make the piece muddy and not realize it or whatever. And he was just really, you know, I'm so grateful, man. It was really awesome. And then on top of that, you know, he gave me this amazing piece that he did. And he even drew a little bit back on the back, you know, he was like trying to explain some form and function, you know, like over detail and under detail and stuff like that. And, you know, he was showing me some cross. Really thing he kept hitting me up about was like the thick to thin thing. He was like, that's the thing that's really weighing down my inks and making it not that good, is that I'm not thicking to thin properly and that all my values have the same weight, you know.
You mean feathering?
Yeah, like when you do pullouts and stuff like that, you know, like that kind of stuff. Like, and then he kind of like gave me this thing to really like help explain a lot of that stuff, you know, and really giving me this to show me the values of how you go about it or whatever, you know, and showing me here on like some examples of it, you know, the line weights getting thinner and thicker in spots in the correct places to give the correct ideas of what's taking place, you know.
Yeah.
So it was amazing to, you know, to get professional criticism from someone like him, you know. And then on top of him, I also happened to run in, and I hope I'm getting his name right, Joel Adams. And Joel Adams was Neil Adams' son.
Oh,
and I guess cool. He's also a comic book artist working for Marvel right now.
Oh yeah.
And he was quite the snidely guy, you know. He was really cool, but like he just was like, you know, right when I walked up, and I was like, would you mind looking at my stuff? He was like, well, I'm not going to be nice to you, dude. He goes like, I'm just going to, if you want, you know, me to look at your stuff, I'm going to look at it and tell you what I really think. And I was like, yeah, dude, you know, rip it up.
Yeah.
And even he was like, oh, you know what I mean? He was like, wow, you know, these are pretty good. You know what I mean? It was like pretty cool to hear that from someone like him, you know. But even he was like, you know, use more a graphic reference and stuff like that. You know, he hammered me on the bats in that piece, you know, with the bats or whatever, the motorcycle, you know, he was like, these bats are all just silhouettes. He's like, these things should be like, he's like, all these things, you should have spent so much more time on the bats. He's like, think how good this piece would be if all these bats look like this one up in front, you know, because I have like one highly detailed bat in the front there, and then the rest are just like silhouettes or whatever, you know, because I was just
Yeah.
trying to create a cloud effect, you know, like, because, you know, you can't really see every bat in a cloud of bats, you know what I mean? Like in those.
Yeah, and you know, when it's printed, you're not going to see that detail. If you put all that detail in every bat, you're not going to see all the detail. I mean, you should be doing the super detail on the front ones, and then as it goes back, start losing the detail. I don't know why he would be saying that. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
You
I
know
don't
what
know.
I'm
You know what I
saying?
mean? He was just giving me his 2 cents, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And he was, you know, he was a really cool guy to do that for me. And it was like, I didn't even realize that he was, because he was like, well, you know, I'm a, you know, a student of Neil, and Neil would say this, and Neil would say that. And Neil would look at your work and he would say this, this, and that, you know? And I was like, that's the end of
Yeah.
it. I was like, so obviously you knew Neil. I was like, did you work with him? He goes, well, I didn't work with him. He goes, Neil was my dad. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, no doubt. I was like, wow, lucky for you, man. And he's like, yeah, you know, like I met all the big guys, and I was like, had Stanley over at my house for dinner and stuff. I'm like,
That's cool. That's
yeah,
awesome.
must be wild, right? You know what I mean? Growing up in a house like that.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. That's
So that
cool.
was cool too. And I mean, I met, you know, I met other local creators, and I got some of their art and shared some of mine with them. And that was super fun. Like I got these from a couple local guys. And this one is pretty fun. You know, it's this really nice looking Aquaman, King of the Sea looking thing here, you know.
Is that like from a real DC artist, or is that
No,
just
this
a
was just a
local?
local artist guy who was just
Yeah.
showing his stuff. You know what I mean? I stopped and talked to him a little bit about how to get a booth, you know.
Yeah. Are you thinking about getting a booth next year?
Yeah, I might even try to do it this year because they come back in June, I think.
Oh, that's
Yeah, they
cool.
have it twice a year. And that one is pretty nice, man. I mean, that's not bad. It's all Photoshop, you
Oh,
know,
it is?
most of your effects, you know what I mean? I think, you know, obviously he drew it, but whatever, you know, I mean, but all the color and all the like effects are Photoshop stuff. And it's pretty cool, man. I mean, I like this a lot. And I I gave him a copy of Six Lords of Sound.
Yeah. So
And he got,
you brought some Six Lords of Sound?
yeah, I brought like maybe 4 or 5 of them. I gave one to Joe Rubenstein. I gave one to
Yeah.
frickin', you know, Neil Adams' son. You know what I mean? Frickin' can't hurt,
Awesome.
right?
Yeah.
Can't hurt to have Joe Rubenstein have a copy of Six Lords of Sound. You know what I mean? Like, maybe he'll open it up and look at it and read it one day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
infected Joe Rubenstein. You know what I mean? Who would even imagine that, right?
Yeah. That'd be cool. That'd be awesome.
And so this one too, you know, this was another piece from a local guy, and you know, I gave him we traded. He gave me this, and I gave him a copy of Six Lords. You know, we
Yeah.
exchanged some pictures and stuff. You know, he signed it for me here.
Cool.
Little signed signature there. And you know, Wendy and Richard Peeney were going to be there, but they're there today, and I couldn't make it on Sunday, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
this is not a Wendy Peeney original, I don't think. I think this is like the guy that works for her now. He kind of apes her style, you know. But this was a little freebie giveaway
That
they
looks
had
a
there.
lot. That looks like her stuff.
It isn't though. It's this guy over here, like B.V. Varney or something like that. Like I don't know, in something Simpson. I guess probably did the colors or whatever. And this B. Varney guy did the inks. He's just aping her style. You could tell it's not her. The edges are just too rough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everything she does is brushed. This is not done with a brush. You know what I mean? Like you get to look at it and tell it isn't. You know.
Right. Yeah.
And if it
That's
is, the
cool.
guy who's doing it don't have a steady hand like she does. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool that you had a good time. That's awesome.
Oh yeah,
I
it's
don't.
super fun.
Yeah, it's cool that you live in an area that their conventions are plentiful. There's like 2 or 3 here every year, and that's it.
Yeah,
I'm not.
I don't know if there's like how often they have them or whatever, or like, you know what I mean? It was like a
Yeah.
toy anime comic book kind of fair thing or whatever.
Yeah.
This was another guy whose stuff I got, and this was pretty fun. This actually reminded me a little bit of like your stuff or whatever, dude. I mean, even the art is like, you know, somewhat similar. You know, it's pretty awesome. And this was Martians versus Mobsters. Or no, it's Monsters versus Mobsters. Look at that. That's
Right.
great. You know what I mean? That's,
That's cool.
that really reminds me of your stuff right here. Like this really reminds me of your stuff. And, like this is not that far away from like what you just did with Robert E. Howard, and H.P. Lovecraft, you know what I mean? Like, so there's a lot of people out there thinking something. Look at the colors on that. This is pretty wonderful stuff, man.
Yeah.
And his other one is Monsters versus Martians. We got.
He likes his mobster.
He was an older guy. He was like a dude in his like late 60s, 70s or whatever. And he had actually, I guess, performed in a couple like, rubber suit monster movies, in the early 80s, cool. Like when that genre was sort of coming to it, it's in there, I guess maybe like some low budget alien, ripoffs kind of thing or whatever, He writes these. I guess he was not the artist, and the artist wasn't there, unfortunately. But
he's the writer.
Yeah, these are pretty fun, man. I mean, look how cool the art is on that. That's pretty good, Like, what do we got? Some Frankenstein here. We got some. Looks like possibly like the Mummy right here, or like
Elvira or something.
Yeah, it's we got Elvira or like whatever, female Dracula or the mom from the Addams Family or whatever. That whole thing. Yeah, super cool. And it was a lot of fun, man. And just meet other comic book creators and hang out with them, and like see the stuff they're doing, and meet other people with like-minded freaking ideas and minds.
Yeah, super cool. That's always awesome. That's always awesome.
So Sonia Leonardo says that most of California cons seem to be for anime nowadays, and it's like anime is so hugely popular.
Yeah, there's a lot of anime and manga fans out there, but that's cool. That's cool. It's all part of it.
I mean, that's mostly what was there too. I mean, mostly it was kind of like it was like a flea market for like people selling their toys or whatever.
Yeah.
There was a lot of toy vendors. A lot of toy vendors were there.
Well, comic books really aren't big sellers. Like most,
there was a lot. I mean, there was a lot of comic book vendors there, but I mean, not as many as I mean, they just seemed like because they would bring a big booth and then they'd have all their long boxes or whatever. So there's like maybe 6 of those guys, and by the time you got 6 dudes with 400 long boxes, you got it covered. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And everything else is just like people with all their different toy stuff, because a lot of people are 3D printing their own toys. You know what I mean? A lot of people are. A lot of people are creating their own stuff now, like, and there was a lot of like really amazing artists doing beautiful stuff. There was one little Asian girl there who was doing the most beautiful, like Final Fantasy-esque watercolors.
Yeah. Did it look like, what's that famous one?
Yes. Yes. The guy who does all the the guy who does the Final Fantasy covers and all that stuff, like the dude that does the art on the manual, like on the inside or whatever, what I mean? Does those beautiful, like washy, like, watercolor, all soft and stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't think it's one person. I think there's several Japanese.
Well, you're probably right. You're probably right. But I'm just saying, like, she drew in that kind of style, and she was very good,
Yeah.
And it was all
it's a type of style.
Very cool, super cool to see that, And just a lot of fun to go out and see other people. And when you do that, you realize, because it's like the comic book industry, it's not dying. It's better than ever. You know what I mean? People love it. It's and people out there doing it. It's just growing into something different. And it's like the industry has failed us. You know what I mean? They don't know what to get out. They don't know who to get it out to. Like they just don't know. They don't know. It's like they don't even read comics anymore. Like they don't know anything about the industry that they're in or something. You know what I mean? Unless you're like Jim Lee or someone like that. But the behind the scenes people that are really running the corporations, I just don't feel like they're clued in to what people really want. And consequently, the industry just feels like it's fading away because, even under our eyes when we know it isn't, because you can see how huge manga is all around the world. You know what I mean? Like, their stuff is freaking gigantic. And like in Asia, when they have like, did you make your own manga events or whatever, come and sell it. Like they're like 4 times the size of our Comic Cons. You know what I mean? Like, like they have these massive events in Japan that'll have like, you know, 3,000, 4,000 people all vending in it, you know what I mean, all at the same time, just everybody like doing their own personal stuff. I think it was like I'd heard Ed Piskor say somewhere, and he was talking about, I think it was the guy that did Akira, and he was talking about you could always tell how vibrant an industry is by how many people do it themselves or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
is film a huge industry? You can tell film is a huge industry if there's tons of people out in the world trying to make movies, even if they aren't movie makers or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
novels are huge. Are there a lot of people out there writing novels? Of course there are. You know, they're not all novelists, but they all want to write novels. And, you know, so like you can always tell by how, you know, how well something is doing in pop culture by how many people are trying to take part in it offline or whatever, you know, like on their own time. And you clearly see that in comics. It's, you know, huge.
Yeah.
Like there's
Yep.
just a lot of people out in the world, and they all love comics. They all love comic characters. They all want to create their own things. They want to be part of the things that have been created. They want to honor the stuff that they think is beautiful, and, you know, feel like they're part of, you know, the big story of that, you know, through culture and through time. And I mean, you know, we should all be able to, like, nothing should be sacred, you know what I mean? Like, you want to do a story where Santa Claus is a time barbarian but he saves Christmas, you know what I mean? Then, you know, you should be able to, or, you know what I mean, like,
Yeah, definitely.
regardless of what you're thinking, you know. This little thing right here was like pretty wild, where this guy's little mini comic, why
Zombie
zombies
brain.
weren't brains. And
Oh,
it was just, it's just a, you know, it's just a silly little you know, like mini thing, and it's a bunch of little jokes or whatever. But you know, this guy loves drawing zombies, and, you know, it's his
yeah.
favorite thing in the world. And he just wanted to make a book of little, you know, zombie jokes, and, you know, what the zombies are doing with the brains, you know what I mean, in their zombie apocalypse world where there are no humans now, I guess, you know. And it's just super fun, you know, see someone come and say, you know, all these little brain jokes. They really enjoy a good brain freeze, you know.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, there's so many indie comics creators out there that you're right. I mean, you know, there's just a lot of people doing it. So it's
Yeah,
not
and, you
dead.
know, it's important and it's rad, and we'll keep the industry alive. And even if it, you know, even if Marvel goes belly up and DC goes belly up or something, you know, we'll always, you know, there's always going to be people like me and you and Dan Goodwin and Byron, and, you know what I mean. And we're always going to be out there at our freaking desks when we get home from work. You know what I mean? Because we do this stuff like the way other people build crossword puzzles, or, like, you
Yeah,
know, build freaking, you know, 3,000 or 10,000 piece puzzles or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, you do it for joy, and, you know, you get this dopamine as you're working on it or whatever. And, you know, like, that's the thing about like AI art is, like, people will be like, oh, like AI art, it could do this, could do that. You know what AI art can't do? It can't make my brain feel good. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, AI art can't make me feel like I've accomplished something important, you know, like,
No,
and it
no.
won't for anybody else, you know. People
Yeah,
use
yeah.
AI art.
AI is such a horrible thing. I mean, we haven't really talked about it, but just the fact that it's stealing our artists, you know, work, and it's not without any kind of acknowledgement or compensation or anything. It's just like
I agree.
right now somebody is using your art in their AI book
You're
or
100%
whatever.
right. Yeah.
You know?
I'm sitting over here spending hours, you know, circle templing every Kirby Crackle on this page, you know what I mean? And then, yeah, some AI guy's going to come along and just tell it to do that. And it's going to whip it up in like half a second or whatever, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and then they say they're AI artists. They're like adding prompts and stuff, and then and saying that they're artists. It's just I don't know. I
It's
could just go
hilarious.
crazy over it.
Dude, like, I saw this thing where Miyazaki was just like, I felt bad for the new generation, you know. He's like, he's like, I just don't, he goes, that makes me want to lose faith in the world when I hear things like this. Because the guy was like, he's like, why are you doing this? And the guy's like, well, we want a computer to be able to create art that looks like your art. And he's like, why?
Right? Yeah.
Why do
Why?
you want that?
Yeah.
You know, he's like, you want a computer with no heart to create my heartfelt art? You know, he's like, why?
Yeah.
Why is that important to you? Oh, it will help to unlock ideas to the masses. He's just like, oh, I feel so sorry for, you know, this next generation of people growing up, you know,
Yeah. And but
nothing but
you
good
know,
experience.
even though I say that about AI, I'm not anti technology. doing certain things and helping, like it can be a tool, but if you're using it as a tool to help you make better art, that's one thing. But if you're using the tool to steal
Make
other
art.
artists, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that's completely
See, like
different.
I was watching a Japanese manga team or whatever, and it was like three people, and they were doing this sort of like they do this sort of very heightened kind of cutesy, what do they call it? Kawaii or whatever, kawaii or whatever, where it's very like cutesy baby looking characters or whatever. And
Yeah.
it's this little witch girl, and she lives in this sort of strawberry shortcake universe, where everybody's houses are like big strawberries or big blueberries or whatever. You know what I mean? It's that kind of cartoon,
Yeah.
language or whatever. And she was using it like she was using the AI art, but not in her art. And she would go like, oh, like I use it for like design ideas. She goes like, now say if I have to think of one of these houses, she goes, there's a whole neighborhood of these houses and they all need to be unique or whatever. So she goes, I already have this little neighborhood, but now there's a new character pop up. So she's got to have a house now. So now we have to, have this and this and this. She goes, well, I'll just tell the AI thing like, oh, the berry is the house and it needs to, blah, blah, blah. It needs to have all these decoration things. And she'll throw it, a bunch of information. And then the AI thing will inevitably make 10, 15 ideas of this thing that she's threw at it, and it's a little house with a little picket fence and a bunch of little flowers around it and da-da-da, whatever, so it throws up 15 different versions of a little berry house with a picket fence
Right.
around it and flowers, right? And then she looks at it and she picks the elements of the different ones that she thinks work, and then she draws that herself. She goes, oh,
Right.
so now I don't have to design the house. I can just draw what what they designed, and I gave it the information to design it. She's like, I don't use this art because this is not good. She's like, I will redraw it in my style, so like, it's what my fans expect or whatever.
Right.
But she was implementing it to save her the time of designing it or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like instead of her spending a whole day designing the house aesthetic, she just let the AI do it. But then she redrew the stuff herself.
I could totally picture using AI when I'm like older, like if I'm like 75 or whatever, and only instead of using somebody else's art, I think you can input your own art. So I could, make comic books using all of my old previous art. And I think that would be kind of cool because, you
Yeah,
get old and you can't see and you can't, you're Charles Schultz and your
yeah.
lines are all crazy. I
And I
could
mean,
totally
who
see doing
knows?
that.
What if you could just tell it to, like make this into an animated thing or something, or you know what I mean? Like, sure, you never know. It might become something in the future, that is useful or whatever, or make open doors for people. But the thing is like the creative artist himself will always, be the thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just don't believe that there'll ever be an AI art that could create Mark Silvestri style, that could create Jim Lee's style. Now, the AI art can
They can emulate
recreate.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, it can emulate. Yes. It can emulate Rembrandt. It could emulate, Picasso, but it can't be Picasso. It can't be Rembrandt. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
consequently, those things, like those men created those things. I don't think AI will ever create an art that will become, like Picasso or you know what I
Right.
mean, like a
Right.
Monet or whatever. That could
Yeah.
emulate. Once Monet or someone creates that style, surely it can probably like do it, maybe even do it better for all I know. But I don't think it'll ever be able to create it. You know what I mean? Like an AI art, will never be able to be a Miyazaki and create something that never existed and then becomes beloved. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't believe
Yeah.
it could ever do that. And the real thing is that when we are artists like you or I, as we get this joy. I mean, that's why we come back to it again and again and again. You know what I mean? That's why we do this for hours and hours and hours. It's because there's this addictive joy that takes place that you love so much when you're creating. You feel fulfilled. It's beautiful. When you're finished, you've created something that's there for forever. You can always come back to it and enjoy it again and again. It's a real thing that you made into the world. This joyfulness, and you get this dopamine, splash in your brain that tells you it's good and that you're good for doing it or whatever. And AI art will never get that, and people who use it will never feel that. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's
No,
part of the
but
human experience.
say you could make your art and have it be as good as it is now and only make it faster.
Well, yeah, that's kind of like I said, like that girl
You know
was
what I'm
kind of
saying?
using it to implement it in that kind of a fashion to where, like, instead of
Yeah.
spending an entire day to design the house, she just lets that thing do it, and then boom, she's got it up, and running in, less than a half hour or whatever, as opposed to, 2 days of looking at, different berries you might want to use or whatever, or different picket fences or something, or you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Right.
so I mean, I could definitely see it being useful, and anything could be a tool. You just hope it doesn't, run ramrod over the real thing. And I just don't know if it ever could, like, sure, like you could have a person who has an idea and use it, but it's always so bad right now. I mean, no matter what, thing they're using, it's always so bad. Like, instantly tell when it's AI stuff, and
Oh
I don't
yeah,
like it.
100%. Yeah, no, but it's gonna get better,
Yeah, well,
unfortunately or unfortunately.
we'll see, what I mean, where we land. Maybe we're, who knows, humanity may be marching off a cliff that, ends tomorrow for all we know. You know what I mean? So
Well, I have this. I was telling my wife about this earlier. So, I mean, we're headed for a global economic collapse from the robots. I mean, the robots are going to just take over every facet of.
well, we'll see how that goes. Like I personally, I work with some robots at my work, and they're not very good, dude. I can tell you that right now. Like,
Right,
the
but they're
robots aren't
getting
coming for anybody's
better.
job too fast.
Oh, they're getting better. I mean, just look at every grocery store or Walmart or whatever where you're doing the self checkout instead of having employing 15 people at the register. They're employing one to look over those machines. So there's and then I mean just everything. You pass by a garbage truck and have you seen those new ones that pick it up like a crane and then
Yeah,
put it in the
yeah,
back?
we have those.
So then you've
Yeah,
got the driver and before you would have three. And what about the self-driving cars with the all of the truck drivers out of business, taxi
I don't
drivers
know,
out of
man.
business?
I don't think it's coming anytime soon, dude. That
It
stuff's
would
like it's like
10 years,
it's
10
more
years.
hype than anything right now. Like, it
No,
doesn't work right. You know what I mean? Like,
right
it's not
now,
there yet.
right now, but 10 years, within 10 years, pretty much everybody's going to be out of a job and it's going to be a global collapse. And I just
I
don't
don't
know
think it's
what's
going
going
to
to
be
happen.
that fast, but it might be by the time like me and you are heading towards the end of things. You know what I mean?
Well,
By the time we're in our
that's what I'm
70s or
saying. It's going to
80s,
be 10 years. Have you seen the robot that Boston Dynamics just came out with? That you should look that up. If you haven't seen any of the Boston Dynamics robots, they're like doing flips and
I
and
know, but see, I want you to
stuff.
understand that you're seeing a couple seconds that they model together. Okay, maybe that thing can do flips all over the place, but if you set that thing down for 3 hours and ask it to work, it's going to inevitably fail 50 times during that 3 hours, Alex. You don't
Yeah,
understand, dude. These things
yeah,
are not.
because it's the beginning. But once it's
Yes,
not the
dude. It's like,
beginning,
we brought these delivery robots move around our building or whatever and deliver stuff. When they brought them in, they were like, okay, we don't need you guys at all at this. We're good. We're moving everybody else to a different thing. Well, then one day everybody was back doing it, and so the robots do is help out. But they're
yeah,
constantly they don't do anything fast. They just add to it. You know what I mean? So it's like
right.
you need all of us and the robots too. You know what I mean? To even like close to what they want. Like,
Do
and that's
you
where it's
think
at right
that
now.
do you think that your company fired anybody because of that?
No, they didn't, because we're union. You can't. You just get
Right,
moved somewhere else in
right.
the building.
So you can't picture them letting people go because they just don't need as many people
Well, you can't.
because of
Like,
the
as long as
robots?
we're part of the union, that's not the way it works. You know what I mean? You
Right,
can't.
right.
They can't. Like, but
Yeah,
you can get fired. I mean, you won't get fired if you do something stupid. You can't steal. You know
right,
what I mean? You
right,
get fired. But I mean, like, they can't just let you go because they were trying to replace you with robots.
right. Well, but they could not hire future people.
Yeah, or they could break the contract in the future or something and just use
Right.
robots or whatever. But that ain't gonna
Yeah.
happen either. I'm not really worried
It's
about
gonna
that.
mark my
But I
words,
mean,
it's gonna
it
happen
will happen
eventually.
eventually, like you say. But not for an old guy like me. By the time I'm,
Not for
because I'm
not for
almost
us.
going to
It's
retire.
not for us.
Yeah. By
We'll
the time I'm
be in the
65, I'll be
retirement home.
retired. I'm
Yeah,
50 something right now. I'm 56. You know what I mean? So I just got to get through another 10 years and I'm good to go. Like,
yeah,
but yeah, it's definitely, and in Krypton, everybody has three robots. And the three robots do
yeah.
everything for you. You
Right.
tell your robot to go find resources and build a house, and it does. You know what I mean? You find your
Yeah,
robot to go get resources for food, and it does. Like, they don't have industry like we have. They have, like, small collective things that each person just does or whatever. Because every person is like a industry unto themselves because they all have 3 robots, you know.
Right, right. I mean, I'm thinking eventually things will even out. Yeah, like you look at Star Trek, nobody works in Star Trek. They don't get paid. They just do things because they love doing it because they don't
Yeah,
need anything because of the replicators.
there's no wealth system. Yeah, because
Right,
you know they've gotten off the wealth system in the theoretical world of Star Trek or whatever. But
right.
that's one of the things that pins us down, Alex. You know, like I know we're gonna sound all like conspiracy theorist guys right now, but dude, you know, like there's all those dudes, like there's those guys that there's a guy who created a an engine that ran on water. You know what I mean? They killed him.
Yeah,
You know, there's a dude who created a little machine that made endless amounts of electricity. Killed him.
yeah,
Anytime a human being creates an idea that will separate us from the wealth system kills him to keep us on the wealth system. You know what I mean? If humanity was just, living by the ideas that it did, and we would already be in the Jetsons future we dream of, you know what I mean? But the
yeah. I think
wealth
so too.
mongers of the world imprison the poor, you know what I mean? And will
Yeah,
not allow the innovations that we earn ourselves, that we make ourselves,
yeah,
humanity. They deny that to us to keep us
yeah,
slaves.
yeah. I think you just lost us all of our conservative fans.
I'm just saying,
Oh
man,
well.
I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with wealth and making money. I love having money. Okay. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but we'll never be in that Star Trek future until everybody is equal.
It's got to be, yeah, it's got to be a personal responsibility. It's got to be a personal growth, I guess, as a species. So
Absolutely.
maybe we'll
Sometimes
get
I'll come
there.
up with the wildest ideas, like, because I'll think about things like that sometimes, and I'll just be like, you know, like there's a wild thought I recently had. I was like, what if like all the fear and all, the apprehension that people have and how we've been getting worse and worse, and people are becoming more and more paranoid of each other, and people are becoming like more and more distrustful. I was like, what if it's because we have this great killing industry where we kill all this cattle and all this stuff and we eat it, and all these things are so frightened when they go in there, to their death, and we consume all that fright and fear, and after doing it like this for the last 80 years, like we've been doing as a country, maybe it's starting to have a like horrific effect on our inner workings or whatever. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
people, it's just like, it's just, and that's a really good, obviously I don't really think that, that's just my brain playing around. But what it
Yeah.
makes me think is like who knows, like there's so much happening in the evolutionary world of man, there's so many things inputting you, there's so many things causing this or that informative to take place, and you just don't know which ones are having what kind of ramifications on humans. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not like all of humanity for the last 10 million years has grown up 10,000 cattle a year, whatever. Like, men used to hunt, men used to farm, if they did slaughter cattle, they slaughtered a cow that year. You know what I mean? Like, what
Right.
I'm saying? Like, they didn't have an industry where they just killed and killed and killed and slaughtered 24 hours a day. The death floor runs, and it's like, I get it. We have to feed our culture. My father was a farmer. I grew up around all that stuff. When I was a very little child, I used to have to sit there and watch the wholesale murder of rabbits, the wholesale murder of
Yeah.
chickens. You know what I mean? Because we would harvest the animals. Sometimes you use the animals for feed and stuff. And they get turned into feed. So I understand the commodity of all that stuff, but at the same time, you just don't know what kind of effect that has on people over such a long time, or the animals around us, or all the things that are being impacted by our existence.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's true.
it's just trippy to think about stuff like that, and just wonder what's going on with us and where we're headed. Because we all want the one thing all humans want is we all want a good future for our children. We all want a
Yeah.
safe
Yeah.
place. We live in this paradise Earth that seems to be the only thing, that we could come across that seems to have life on it. And on our planet, life is everywhere. It's so abundant. It's so everywhere. We're still finding stuff we didn't even know existed. You know what I mean? Like we're
Yeah.
still finding new tree frogs that we didn't know were out there, or some new deep sea water fish that never came up to the surface before. Or, you know what I mean? Like we
Yeah.
live in this paradise world, and we're just willing. There's so many men on earth that are willing to throw it all away just to have this luxurious life of wealth just during the tiny window of their life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
like a human's existence is like so fast, dude, in the big scale of things. Like our life goes up faster than when you watch a match, be lit and go up and go out. You know what I mean? Like
Pretty
that's how
much. Yep.
fast our lives are. And it's
Yep.
like greedy, horrible men, dude, will, destroy the world, you know what I mean, for the sake of a luxurious instance for their life. You know what I mean? And I don't understand it.
Yeah. Yep. Me either.
Money
But
doesn't really mean that much to me. It's cool to have it, but if I had a lot of it, I certainly wouldn't, you know what I mean? Like, I'd probably go out and try and be Batman or something.
yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Or Grips,
Got it.
probably would be
Yeah,
more like what you get from me.
grips. That I was thinking that I was going to do a story a while ago of what if I really did get like Superman powers. I would not, you see these movies where they get the ability to fly, so they automatically fly as far up in as they can, up into the sky, whatever. I would be like, what if I can fly, but I only have like 15 minutes of it, you know? So I'm not gonna fly that far. I'm not gonna fly that high. So
That's
maybe
funny
I'm
because I've thought about this same thing, and it's like I have a fear of heights. And I was like, if I learned how to fly, I was like, it would still be hard for me at first to fly up in the sky. It's not like I would shoot up out of the atmosphere and just look at the world
yeah,
like a marble underneath me. I'd be
yeah,
terrified. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
yeah. I was like,
yeah,
I'd have to start slow. You know what I mean? And like,
yeah,
see
yeah,
if I can get up to the top
and
of the
then
building or something.
like you're flying around and then I would get lost. Like, I mean, I've got pretty good direction, but I use the GPS on my phone or my car or whatever for the
So
most
funny.
part. So I would get lost. I would have to find the interstate, then I'd have to follow it as well as I could. So I would probably be like the worst superhero of all time because
You'd be
I'd get
like
lost and I would not want to, do stuff that I would think would be reckless.
remember the Greatest American Hero or whatever.
Yeah. I love that
Like,
show.
got to carry that flashlight to fly or whatever because you're off balance in the area.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that would be me pretty much. So, what are you drawing? What are you drawing?
Yeah, well, I'm inking right now. This is this is some that project we're working on now or
Yeah.
whatever. This is like but this whole thing is coming along pretty nice. Let me see here. I just finished this one. I mean, I'm doing these story pages first because I know that big double page, which I don't happen to have next to me right now, sadly. The Super Collider one, you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
gonna take me to do, so I'm kind of like doing these story pages first. But I recently just finished this one.
That's awesome.
So like you have that shot, that big shot of Dr. Entropy, that hand in in the face or whatever, and he's like, "You guys have
Yep.
to close this door, right?" And then that next shot is like, it's everybody's in the collider and all the reclamation guys are coming through the black hole, and Superion goes flying, and he's like, Dr. Entropy's like, Red Genesis and Superion, you have to close that door, and Superion's like, I won't fail a second time, because he just lost his world or whatever, so he's racing down that thing. And then this is the very next page. Okay, so like he swims into the gravity well, and this is like, it's like he circles, like it's like the door is at this point of the circle guard, he goes all the way around it to the other side, right? And then he comes up behind where the black hole is happening, and it's like a gravity well. And he swims in there, and all of like the gravity of the black hole is like trying to fucking close in on him, and he's trying to keep all the particles from from colliding. And then Dr. Entropy is like, Red Genesis, you have to freaking pour all of your chaos, into that, black hole. And then he's just like, Dr. Entropy, if I do that, I'll kill every little thing on this freaking planet, everything in this room, And then Entropy's just like, don't think about anything, dude. You just have to unleash everything you have, And he just, steps back and he's like, so be it, Doctor. And he just like, unleashes all of his power, And then that's this thing right here. And this is the next page, like Superion's in the gravity well. And he's just like, and all the particles are colliding on him. And he's just keeping the freaking, the pinpoints from coming together. And then the whole building is just like coming down. And Dr. Entropy runs in and saves the doctor. And, they fly away. And then the whole building explodes. And then Red Genesis comes flying out, and Superion's coming out of the rubble, and then we got this like cool little tiny shot I did the other day. I had to like erase some stuff here, and I redrew this. I don't even know if you could see it, but it's like Superion and Dr. Entropy, and there's the Doctor and Red Genesis, and they're all coming together, and they're like, "Wow, I think we did it." You know what I mean? And Superion comes over and he's like, "Dr. Entropy, thanks to your good timing, I think we've saved this world." And then just then, it's like, boom. You get this giant explosion in the sky, and then they all just sort of like are like, "What was that?" And they're all just sort of like turning around to see what it is.
So how many pages do you have done?
This is the second issue. I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 pages. Then I'm working on the 6th one now.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. So I was thinking, Superion, how did he fail his planet?
I have it in the first Entropy Alliance.
Right.
It's in
right.
that little 2-pager.
Right. But it's I think you should go in more depth.
Well, I probably will as the story
at
goes
some
along.
point,
I mean, I
because
definitely will.
do you think it's he failed because he wasn't good enough, or do you think he failed because of some other reason?
I think he failed just because he's overwhelmed. On his planet, there aren't superheroes because they're highly evolved or whatever. And he was just sort of like super cop, I guess, is kind of what he would be like. Like he's just sort of like what's that Alan the alien guy who just sort of flies around and keeps planets safe from other superpowered beings or whatever in
Invincible,
Invincible or whatever, like that kind of thing or whatever.
Yeah,
like he doesn't get to live on Hyperborea, you know what I mean? Like he I think he's like born there, but because of his like perfect genetics, wherever he got, you get selected, and he's not immortal. He has to live a mortal life, and then he'll pass the badge. And, the idea is that you would pass the badge on to another one, you know what I mean, at some point, and someone passed the badge on to him at some point,
Right.
And whenever you get picked to be the Superion, you get enhanced into this like, version of Superman, and then you live on this big base on the moon, and you just guard the planet, you know what I mean? You're like, your evolution is pushed forward to a point to where you no longer require food. You don't really aspire for companionship. You just have this ultimate love for your race and for your society, and desire to protect it.
Do you think it might be more powerful if he failed because of some sort of not personality, but like maybe he didn't pay attention in a certain way or something like that?
I think what it was is that he'd never seen anything like this. Like they'd never seen anything like this. And at first they think it's like, it's like a pandemic, and they think that it's just like spreading amongst the people, but they don't realize that, he doesn't realize until he meets Dr. Entropy.
Right.
That is
right. But he doesn't really fail. Not on purpose. You know what I'm saying? He's like, he doesn't really fail.
No, I mean, what happens essentially is he comes down to freaking, to battle this thing that he thinks is a plague, and then realizes that it's the people. You know what I mean? Like he first, he knows it's the people being changed or whatever, right? And he thinks he can stop this thing, but then they are already using the planetary defenses against him. You know what I mean? Like the planet has all these like AI robots that protect it and stuff, and you know what I mean? These AI battleships that are under like Superion's order in case there's ever like a intergalactic invasion or whatever. They have all these robot armies led by their great king champion, that'll protect them, but the reclamation is a living thing that is made up of the people, that becomes the people that live there, infects them, and then becomes them. And then like, before some of these things change, they went through the systems and aimed everything at Superion, you know what I mean? So he's fighting against the defenses, and then destroys half of the defenses trying to get to the people, and then gets to the people and realizes he's just battling his own population, and then doesn't want to destroy them, and then leaves under the pretense of hoping that he could freaking find something to save the planet,
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
And
So I'm working.
this is going to go into a lot of cool places. Yeah, Oh
Yeah,
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 let us, dude. Like, can you bring up that piece you showed yesterday? Do you have that nearby?
yeah.
Oh man, I want to see
It's
that. People
always
are going to go crazy for this.
difficult because oh, did I lose it? It's always difficult because it's hard to say when you should um show stuff and when it should be a surprise,
Sure,
like
sure.
like a trailer in a movie. If they show all of the best stuff, then it kind of loses its impact. So
Yeah.
I never know when I should show stuff and when I shouldn't. But
Well, you know what I look at it, Alex? Like, we don't have that many followers, that many people follow us. So I tend to show every page I do on Instagram once,
yeah,
or twice, but they just come and go. And you
yeah,
lose, like, it's not like no everyone's coming back and looking at that page again, going, wow, look at this. Like,
yeah,
it'll pop up, it goes away. I'll come, it'll pop up again, it'll go away. Then I'll letter it, it'll pop again, it'll go away, and then it goes away. But then it's there in the comic later, you know what I mean? And you
yeah,
remember, you're like, oh yeah, I remember this. Or like it excites you for it or whatever, you
yeah,
hope,
yeah, yeah.
Each one of
And
those little
I'll
pages that look fantastic is going to be a page in the comic. So if the pages look that fantastic, then the comic has to be that fantastic. You know what I mean?
right, right, right.
And yeah,
Plus, it
that looks
also looks
fantastic,
different. It
Alex.
looks different in the comic book, rather than on Instagram or whatever.
Yeah, ultimately it always does. Anything looks different in print than on a video, but man,
Yeah.
that's so good, Alex. I love that. That is
Thank you.
really great. And that's part of your old God story, right?
Yep, yep. This is because I don't want to get too much into the story, but it's my character Morgrim, the savage Cyclops, and this is him as a baby being cast away by his mother, and he's
Yeah,
thrown into
I
a
already
river.
could piece it all together because I've already seen the birthing scene,
Yeah,
and they probably had the baby, saw that he was a Cyclops, were horrified about it. Now they're going to try and drown him in the river.
right, right. And this is the old gods say pretty much deciding whether or not they should kill him or let him die or save him or whatever. And I was really kind of torn because one of the things that I really don't like in storylines is prophecies. Like I really think that that's a lazy way to write stuff, and so I was almost going to put some kind of prophecy thing in there, like the old gods would be like, what he's prophesized to do, and then they'd be like, no, we don't care, we'll let him live or whatever. But no, I'm just gonna have it show that because in this world, the old gods are really controlling of everything. Like the reason that he is a Cyclops is because the mother said something bad about the gods, so they cursed it. So I really want to show that they have like a huge impact on the world of Morgrim, pretty much.
Sure, it's a classic sword and sorcery kind of world. I mean, that was one of
Right,
my favorite things about the Michael Moorcock stuff is it's so oriented with the gods or whatever. Like, Elric is just
right,
like enslaved to the gods. The gods are a big part of his life. They're always messing with them. There's always this sort of like, am I my own thing or am I a plaything of the gods? You know what I mean? Are my
right.
decisions my own? Or do you guys put all these thoughts in my head because I'm a pawn in your game or whatever? Like,
Right, right, right. And like Game of Thrones where the gods intervene, but this is even more so. Like they have a real hands-on um interventions with humanity or the earth or whatever. So like that's one of the things I'm having all of my creative friends pretty much. I don't know if you saw that picture that Jamie did of one of the old gods. It's the
I
old god
did.
of
The
strength.
God of Strength. Yeah, it's
Yep, yep.
badass too. Hey, Willie Draws, good to see you, bro. He's saying
Yeah.
that your page looks like a 70s progressive rock cover.
Yeah, definitely does. So,
Could be
yep.
like a Dio cover or something like that top one, you know what I mean? Just like the baby reaching out to the God, that could have totally been like a Ronnie James Dio cover back in the 80s.
Right, right. Yeah. So I mean that's what I had this image in my head so much so that I did the first 3 pages, I did them all penciled and colored and everything. And then I was like, oh, I really need to do this page. This is actually page 7. So I have 3 pages that I have to go back and finish.
That's funny, dude, because that's what I did on this too. It was like I had that big super collider thing. I had done that picture
Yeah.
of Dr. Entropy, the opening shot, and then you have the 2-pager, and I didn't want to draw it. I was like, I'm gonna skip the 2-pager. I'm gonna go to the story part. So I this page, which was, 1, 2, 3. This was page 4, you know what I mean? And then I drew page 5 and 6. And then once I had those under the belt, then I went back and drew page 1 and 2, because it was like,
Right.
page 2 and 3, because it's like, it's a big pain in the butt to draw all that background stuff,
Yeah.
Was not looking forward to that.
Yeah. So this
But
is going to be random access, not this month, but the next April's. Random
yeah, man,
access.
that's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see that story come together, Alex. It's really looking good. All
Yeah,
your stuff lately
I'm
has
pretty into it.
really been getting, more well crafted and more well thought out. I feel like, like that the H.P. Lovecraft thing is really well crafted and really well thought out. And this latest excursion yours, and then you're helping me plot out, and you're also working on this with me as well. And we did the plot to this together. I'm doing the actual scripting, but all the story we plotted together, and it's pretty good, man. So I'm pretty proud of our stuff recently.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny that like I'll be thinking about a story and I'll be thinking about it. When I'm door dashing, be thinking about it when I'm should be sleeping, and it'll just be like twisting in my head, and eventually, and all of a sudden something will pop in. I'll be like, hey, that character does that, and that affects that character, and then like that. So
That's how I work
an
too.
interesting
I
thing.
always think about it on my drive to work and my drive from work, and then when I'm at work working, I'll be turning it over in my head the whole time. Like I do that
Yeah.
same thing. It's like, anytime my brain has to be quiet and I'm just sitting there, I'm always thinking about that stuff. What is this? Who is this? How do I get this character? How do we do this? How do I do that? You know what I mean? How do I make it this and how do I make it that or whatever? But speaking of that stuff, like, don't forget, man, like, you do have those 5 or 6 pages or whatever you're going to commit to it, and like,
Oh yeah.
like I said, like you can pretty much do whatever you want. And the sequence is, is like I said, it's some sort of bank robbery or some sort of thing. And your sequence should start with, some dramatic head boxes between, Entropy and Red Genesis, because they're talking about what took place, at the beginning of your story point. So you could have it begin anywhere you want. They could be in space or they could be traveling to the event, but your thing basically takes place like, they've been told that there's some bad guys attacking a bank. It could be whatever you want. It could be a bank, it could be a national monument, whatever you want to do, you know what I mean? But some villain superhero is attacking this thing. You guys go there under the pretense of stopping him. But what's really happening is in the story is that the reclamation is causing like all these bad events to take place like right before they have an event, because it's like some sort of like side effect of when they begin to appear in the worlds, like in the spots where they make sores and come through, bad events start to happen. You know what I mean? Like, because the area is getting infected by like the reclamation illness, and it's not just person illness, it's a cosmic illness, you know what I mean? So right before the reclamation make a hole, make a wound soft enough to come through into a reality, that area starts to experience phenomenon where bad things take place. You know what I mean? It's causing the probabilities to shift, you know what I mean? To where like, oh, like all of a sudden there's 3 car accidents and a bank robbery and a baby died right here. And then boom, all of a sudden the reclamation appeared. So it's that kind of a thing. You could do whatever you want to, and just, your sequence can end right when the reclamation appear if that's what you want, or you could take it as far as you want, to be perfectly
all right.
honest.
Well, I'm confused then, because I thought I was doing the time thing with Dr. Entropy and Red Genesis.
Yeah, well, this is Red Genesis and Dr. Entropy. It's just like it's just shifted a little bit. It's like the story, is like they're in their, after this first part of the stuff happens, they're arguing over what's taking place, like they're arguing over who brought the reclamation here, why it's happening, what it is, and then all of a sudden they get an alert, beep, beep, beep. They're in their satellite, they get an alert, oh, there's a, event taking place, you guys got to go stop it. And then, Dr. Entropy and Red Genesis are the ones, because like they need time. Red Genesis needs time to deal with what's happened to them, and Entropy is kind of like counseling them through it as they fly to this event or whatever, and then they go there and they have this little event, and then this big thing happens right while they're there, and then the rest of the heroes come and they start to take care of it because they're the only 2 ones there. And then the rest of the heroes come, and that thing ends with the reclamation starting to turn into that. It'll start to turn into a giant kaiju or whatever, and that'll be for the 3rd issue.
Right. Huh. Okay. Well, I think we'll have to talk about it more.
Yeah, we're just you guys are listening to us shoot ideas back and forth, right here in like real time or whatever. But we're well past the hour, bro. Like I don't know if you want to
Yeah.
like keep going with this, or I know you
Yeah. I
got.
gotta, I gotta go. It's been an hour of John, but it's good. It's been good. It was good to hear about your adventures in your convention.
Yeah, once again, I can't thank Joe Rubenstein enough, man. He was so cool and it was so awesome. And I just want to be so grateful to him and just say thanks so much, man. You're the best. And we're all so stoked to even be part of the great legacy and all that stuff. And, just thinking that it was, he's the guy that did the Wolverine freaking miniseries back in the day with Frank Miller. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It was
Yeah.
like,
That's
gave me
awesome.
goosebumps to be perfectly honest, bro. But yeah, it was awesome. Uh-oh, the
Okay.
puppies.
Yeah. Yeah. My dogs are going crazy. They're probably
Yeah, I got to
telling
let
me
my
to
dog
shut it
go
up.
too.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So,
All right, everybody. Super fun hanging out with you guys today. Thanks so much. I know we just drew and talked and goofed off, and there was no actual comic books today, but comic books will be back next time. And comic books from coast to coast. We'll be going over some cool new artists come this Wednesday. Hope everybody tunes in. I'm West Coast Joe.
and I'm East Coast Alex Durbin.
And Alex, what do you say at the end of all of our shows?
I always say, because we're all one giant group, and even if you're an artist or not an artist or just a viewer, I say, see you later. Thanks for watching and keep on creating.